Noachite. And only the code would be one that everybody would follow, the world would be a better place, and Mashiach would come. So you having a hard time listening to me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, now you can hear me. No, but the Noachite code, we really would love to have the world, if everyone would only participate in that code, it would make life so much better for everyone. And we all would be able to live on this planet in a much, much better way. So this is something that we're trying to do. So over the last couple of weeks, we started teaching about this code, and we went through so far 4 of the 7 mitzvot. We did Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. Aleph, we said, was Eva Menachai. First commandment was to be sensitive to all of God's creations, especially the animal kingdom, to be nice to our animals, to our dogs, to our cats, to our cows, to all the animals of the world, and to be sensitive to the creations of God. Second commandment was to be honorable to God, to honor God. Birkat Hashem, to honor Hashem, and to give him the great honor that he deserves, and living in his world, we have to honor him, and we honor also those that are created in his image. The third commandment was to Gimel, which was Gezela, not to steal, but more importantly, it's about respecting other people's possessions, not just respecting them, but respecting their possessions, and honor, making sure that we treat it properly, and we respect their ownership, the ownership of their properties, whether it's real property or portable property or chattel or even intellectual property. That was the third command. Fourth commandment, which we discussed last week, was a law for the court system, that every society must establish justice. And we spoke a lot about justice, and that every society must have a court system with laws and law enforcement, etc., etc. Today we're going to talk about one of the commandments, which we all know from the 10 Commandments, is maybe the most important of many of the commandments between man and man, between man and interpersonal commandment, and that is the prohibition against murder. Now, when we say murder, we make a distinction between murder and killing, because you're allowed to kill for self-defense, right? If somebody comes to you and tries to kill you, you're allowed to in an act of self-defense, and sometimes even to preempt a killing, you're allowed to as well, because to stop someone from killing you, you're allowed to do that. So there are certain instances where killing is allowed, and then, as we know, in the time of the temple, there also was a death penalty, which might also fall into the category of killing somebody for a purpose to act as a deterrent for society. And we also have killing in the case of war, when it's a justified war of self-defense. So then killing is allowed, but murder is what's not. And I want to explain to you a little bit murder, because we need to understand, Kabbalistically, what is the evil of murder? Obviously, everybody will say, obviously, it's Holocausts or murder are terrible, and inquisitions, and murdering people is obviously something which is horrifying, terrible. Okay? You don't have to explain to people a murder is wrong. It's sort of an instinctive thing that we know. But if you think a little bit deeper, we read and we learn that the life of a person is really preordained, predestined. God decides how many years a person shall live. Some people have a mission that needs to be completed in 100 years, and some people have a mission that can be completed in 10 years. So everyone has the days of a person's life is preordained by God. A person will not die a day before they're supposed to die, and not a day later. Many times we go to the hospital and people say, well, the doctor said that they have not more than 2 days left to live. And I say, doctor's job is to heal. Since when do they go into the prophecy business? Prognostications. That's not a doctor's job. The doctor's job is just to heal and to do a good job. And most doctors do a great job at that. They took on themselves the Hippocratic oath. They do what they're supposed to do. But nowhere in that oath does it say that they're supposed to give forecasts as how long a person's going to live. And that's when they probably go beyond their job description. That's not their job description. Of course, family always comes to a person is very sick. The family will always come up. How many more days do we have? You get that a lot, right? So I feel bad for the doctors. The doctors have to become prophets. They have to say, based on our calculations. But I'll tell you, 99% of the time they're wrong when it comes to that. I mean, it might sometimes be only a couple of days wrong, but they're wrong. They never get it 100% right. Because at the end of the day, it's in the hands of Hashem. How long we live, that's not medicine. Medicine helps us to live longer, for sure. But exactly when a person dies, that's in the hands of Hashem. So the question is, if so, what is the evil of murder? Good question. If we say that exactly when the person's going to die, he's not going to die a day before he's supposed to die or a day after he's supposed to die. And when the person dies, that's when they're supposed to die. And the worst murderer cannot succeed in killing somebody a day before they're supposed to die. Right? And the greatest doctor in the world can't make a person live longer than they're supposed to live. So what is the evil of murder? That's a good question. That's the time the person is supposed to die anyways. So if it's like somebody jumps off the roof and they say, if it's my time, I'll go. If not. Right? A guy that wants to commit suicide, he can't succeed. If God doesn't want him to die, God will find a way that something will happen that he won't succeed. So the time of a person's allotted life is this time. So the murderer, ironically, if he succeeds in killing the person, right? We shouldn't only not be angry at him, but we should give him a yasher koyach. We should give him an aliyah in the shul. You were God's agent. That was the time the person was supposed to die. You were the agent. Person could have died, from a disease. He could have died from this, from that. Many ways that God could have brought about the death. He died from a heart attack. So you accomplished. So what is really the wickedness? What is the wrong? Let's put it that way. Murder. If a person can't succeed in murder without it being approved by God, then they are the agent of God, right? But at the same time, we know the Torah says that the worst evil possible is murder. We know that it's written how terrible, how tragic it is. Right? So what is the evil of murder? So most people think the evil of murder is the victim. I want to suggest that the evil of murder is not so much the victim, because the victim was supposed to go one way or the other. That was their time. The real victim of murder is the murderer. What does that mean? That when you kill someone, you don't just kill that person. When you murder someone, you kill your own soul. You destroy yourself. That's where the murder takes place. Is in the evil that you have, the trajectory of evil that you have brought into your life by committing such a heinous crime as murder. So you have murdered yourself. It's suicide. That's what murder is. Murder is really suicide. Because you can't really affect anybody else with your actions, even though we have free choice and all of that. So this is the question. If we say God gave us free choice, A person murders somebody out of their free choice. But at the same time, we say that the lifespan of a person is also predestined. So how do we reconcile the two things? This is what I'm trying to explain over here. That when a person chooses by their free choice to be an evil person and go and murder somebody, the person that they're killing was supposed to die anyways. But what you have done with the act of murder is you have destroyed your own soul. The murderer has destroyed the soul. Like we say, for instance, like with Lashon Hara. It says, Lashon Hara destroys three people. Lashon Hara, we know what's Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is like evil tongue, right? When you go and you badmouth somebody, you gossip someone, right? So we say the Lashon Hara destroys three people. It destroys, obviously, the life of the person that you're bad-mouthing. But it destroys another two people. It destroys the one who says the evil words, the gossiper, and it also destroys the person that hears the gossip. Because this gossip is like poison. So three people are poisoned. The one that is being bad-mouthed, slandered on the street. The other person who says the gossip, by spreading that gossip, they poison themselves. And also the person who listens to it becomes a party to it. Without the person listening, you could never commit the crime of gossip. So three people, it says, are damaged. So I want to suggest that in murder also, it's primarily the act of murder that is the poison. The person destroys themselves by committing a crime of such a magnitude as murder is the worst kind of crime you could do. The person is destroys themselves through that. And that's why we call them a murderer. That's why in Jewish law, a murderer is subject to the death penalty, because they've already destroyed their own soul. Remember, there's a distinction between killing and murder. Right? I'm talking about proper murder. For a proper murder, the murderer has. So this is the. So we have God's plan. So the person murders, the victim. It's very tragic, but the victim was supposed to go. We believe was supposed to go that time. But the murderer, exercised their free choice given by God. And they chose to be a murderer, so they become a murderer. They murder they murder in addition to the terrible crime of murdering the person. They murder themselves. Their soul is tainted and destroyed. Like we find a lot of times with abuser and abusees, right? Abusers in life, people that are abusers, bullies. The biggest rachmanis is on the bully themselves, because they destroy themselves through the act of bullying. Obviously, there are victims, etc. But take the Holocaust, for example. Who really lost in the Holocaust? If you look at it at a simple level, also obviously 6 million Jews is tragedy beyond tragedy. Obviously. But the Jewish people are still surviving today and thriving today and continue on. But the Nazis, they destroy themselves, they destroy their families until this generation now. They're still dealing with this evil that they perpetrated. Now, obviously, look, this whole subject is a hard subject to handle and to talk about, and that's why I'm going to move on to the next thing. But murder is a difficult subject. But if you give a look at murder in the Noahide code, in addition to being to outlawing murder, there also is a hint to the prohibition against abortion. We know that in Jewish law, abortion is not permitted unless the mother's life is in danger, and perhaps also her health might be in danger, or maybe the mental health. Those are issues which I'm not going to get into right now, saying when there are maybe some loopholes for abortion. Obviously, a human life is greater than the life of a fetus, but the Jewish law, and especially Noahide code, which is very important to note that, because Noahide code is a code for all of humanity. In the law of murder, in the law of that it says thou shalt not, that the Noahide should not kill each other. There is a hint that's brought in the Talmud that hints to the prohibition against abortion. Now, we all know there's the famous story as to when life begins, really. That's the big debate about abortion, which keeps on going on. So the different people that came, one said life begins at birth. Another one says, no, life begins when there's a heartbeat. Another one said, no, life begins at conception. And then the Jewish mother got up. She says, no, life begins when you send your kids out of the house and you to university. It's quiet in the house. That's when life begins. Anyways, it's just a joke, but it's because this is quite a serious subject. And so when does life begin? But we know that the Torah prohibits abortion, and it's hinted to the whole law of the prohibition against abortion actually comes from the Noahide code as opposed to the Ten Commandments. In the Ten Commandments, it simply says, thou shalt not murder. That's all it says. There's no extra words. But by Noah, where it speaks about the code of not murdering, so it says, the language of the Torah is, Makei nefesh ha'adam ba'adam, dama yishafech. When you strike the soul of a man through a man, then that man shall be killed. It means there's a death penalty for the murder. So the language in Hebrew is maki nefesh ha'adam ba'adam, striking the soul of a man through a man. But if you give a look, it's a strange language. It's nefesh ha'adam be'adam. Be'adam doesn't mean through a man. It can be translated as that. But the simple meaning of it, be'adam means in a man. So the Talmud explains, can you guys hear me? Can you hear me over here? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Because it says, over here it says, I'm unstable. On my screen it says I'm unstable. So I'm worried a bit. Somebody is telling me that I'm unstable. Okay. We'll take a deep breath. Maybe you can hear me better now. Okay. So we have Maki nefesh ha'adam ba'adam. When the soul of a man is struck through a man, but the simple meaning is be'adam, in a man. The Talmud says, what is the soul of man in a man? What is the soul of a human that's in a human? So they say that must be a fetus. Where do you have a person that's in another person? So they say that refers to the fetus. So maki nefesh ha'adam ba'adam, the one striking the soul of a man that finds itself within another person, dama yish. So that is the Talmud says that is an allusion. That's a hint to the law against abortion. So the Noahide code, in fact, is more severe, is more strict than the Ten Commandments, because the Ten Commandments doesn't speak about. It speaks about you shouldn't kill a person. But over here we speak about a person, a soul that's within a person. So the Talmud says that that's an allusion to the law that is against abortion. So so we see from there that the Noahide code about being careful to honor life and to respect life is not only at the moment of birth, but even before birth, even from after conception, once there's already a soul. We know that Jewish law says clearly that if the mother's life is in danger, then you are allowed to perform the abortion. Now the question is, why is that? And we know there's laws in Jewish tradition that we accept and we know. So the Mishnah writes that if the mother's life is in danger, you're allowed to override the fetus to save the mother's life. The question is why. So in the Gemara in Rashi, in the commentary in Rashi, because Rashi says, because a child before it's born is not really a soul. So the mother already has an established soul. She is already a living person, where the fetus is only part of the mother. It hasn't yet proven it's living. So therefore it says, Rashi says, that a nefesh, a living person, overrides a fetus. So that would seem to imply that the fetus is not really a full-blown life. But if we look at Maimonides, at Rambam describes this law in a different way. The Rambam says that the reason you're allowed to kill a child when it puts the mother's life in danger is not because the child is anything less than alive. The Rambam says because the child is considered a pursuer. And you're allowed to kill a pursuer to save the pursuee. So in other words, the mother was living a normal life, right? And suddenly this child came in the mother's womb and now puts the mother's life in danger. So here you have, it's like one person chasing another person. So the law is that in self-defense, you're allowed to snuff out another life to save your life. There's permission to kill in self-defense. So the Rambam seems to be saying that the mother is sort of defending herself because her life is in danger. She was put into life by this new thing called the fetus, and that's why she's allowed to do it. So according to the Rambam, it would appear that really the fetus is alive, but this fetus, because it puts the mother's life in danger, it forfeits its right to life, so to speak. Even though the Gemara says that really it's not the fetus's fault, it's not by choice. But even if it's not by choice, the Rambam seems to hold. So really it's a combination of the two things. It's a combination of the fact that the child is a pursuer, and also because before birth, it's not yet, doesn't have yet the complete status of a soul. Anyways, be as it may, whatever the reason is, it seems like the life begins to some degree even before it's actually born, and therefore life by a Noachide, they need to respect not only the life after it's born, but also the life before it's born, even though it's still part of the mother and it's part of the mother's body, but we have to give it its due respect as a potential life that's going to be born later on. So the mitzvah of thou shalt not murder, which is one of the part of the Noach, is respecting life, but life in all its forms. Now, life in all its forms, you have at the beginning of life, you have the issue of abortion, etc. And you also have the issue with end-of-life issues, which is known as euthanasia. The word euthanasia means mercy killing. So today there's a big conversation in the laws of Canada today about whether or not they should allow people who are in terrible suffering to end their life with assistance of a doctor. And it seems like the Canadian law is moving in that direction to the point that in other words, they're giving choice, to the point that a doctor that doesn't provide that choice to their patients can lose their job. And so now there's another issue. So until now it was an issue of free rights of people to choose how they go. And now there's an issue of the doctors, the freedom of religion. If a doctor says I'm a religious doctor and I can't participate in an assisted suicide. So the doctors are now fighting that they should be able to be protected, that they won't lose their license. Because if you morally you don't agree to it. Now, what does the Torah say about this, about assisted suicide? Now we know that suicide obviously is something that is forbidden. Suicide is something, yes, it is terrible. Suicide obviously is something that is forbidden by the Torah. And even though people say, I should be able to have to do a suicide, it's my life. My life belongs to me, so I can decide when to end it, when to keep it. So we know that the Torah, that is not the Jewish opinion. The Jewish opinion is it's not our life. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to God. Not only our soul, but also our body. Our body doesn't belong to us to the point that we're not allowed to even tattoo the body. God says you can't mutilate the body. People say, well, it's my body. I can do with it as I want. But that's not the truth. It's not the truth. It belongs to God. God gives us life. He gives us the life. He gives us the soul. He gives us the body. And we have a mission in life. And it's not our job to say we want to finish our mission early. And even though we say before that that nobody can really end the life before the time is up, that's true as well. But in the case of a pure suicide, I'm not talking about a suicide when a person is in terrible pain, etc., etc. There are other issues over there. We'll get to that shortly. But just a pure suicide, somebody's having financial troubles and they want to end their life, right? So that's a rare case where the person is the murderer and the victim at the same time, right? That's what suicide is. Suicide is you are perpetrating the act of murder on yourself. Right? You are the victim as well. So we feel and you feel very bad. So the victim, if they're meant to go, they're going to go. Like we said before, the victim, the time is up. When the day is up that you're going to die, you're going to die. But at the same time, you pollute your soul by doing that act. The act of suicide taints the soul. And in fact, many people say that's one of the greatest crimes of a suicide is that generally we say that death is a form of atonement. That's why we have, when a person dies, the rabbi comes and they say vidui, and we ask for forgiveness, because death itself is an atonement. For all our sins in our life, the death serves as the atonement. But when the death is a crime, when the death itself is forbidden because you're committing the act of suicide, you lose that opportunity to receive that atonement which comes from death. Because the death was done through an act of suicide. So you don't have the opportunity that the death should act as a form of atonement. You lose that opportunity. Okay, but that's a straightforward suicide. Now we're talking about suicides. We talk about suicide. The person has some kind of intractable pain and suffering at the end of life, dementia, all kinds of things that go on with people. They have ALS and all kinds of things. Okay, we shouldn't be tested those kind of situations. But the law of the Torah is that you still can't take your life. Sometimes we say there's a concept of DNR when a person has a case of, let's say, cancer or something, they're riddled with cancer, they're dying and they're ready the last breaths. So a person is allowed to then say, do not resuscitate, don't do heroics. That's something different. That's a passive thing. You're telling the doctor, I don't want you, I'm dying anyways, I'm already there at the throes of death, I don't want you to do. But to pull the plug on life or to do something overtly to hasten the death, you're not allowed to. In fact, in the code of Jewish law, it says even in the person's mamish already dying minutes from the death, you're not allowed to do anything to it says you're not allowed to even push the person or shake the person up when you know that they're dying, lest you might hasten it. So there's a difference between passive euthanasia and active euthanasia, right? Big difference between the two. Famous story in the Talmud about Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian. Chanina ben Tradian was one of the 10 martyrs that we read on Yom Kippur. So they brought him out. They killed at the time of the rebellion of Bar Kokhba. They brought out 10 of the greatest rabbis and they killed them. One of them was Rabbi Akiva that we know, right? And Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian was one of those 10 martyrs in that era, great rabbis that they tried to make an example to the Jews. So they brought him out and they wrapped him up in a Torah scroll, nonetheless, nothing less. And they set him aflame. So it says that they put like tufts of cotton on him, so he shouldn't die quickly. He should die slowly, and he should burn, and to make an example out of him. It was a terrible, terrible, tragic story. It's brought in the martyr prayer that we say on Yom Kippur. So his students came over to him and said, Rabbi, while he was burning, said, open your mouth so the flame should go in, and the fumes should kill you. So the rabbi says, I can't do an act which will hasten my death, even though he was dying, right? I can't do an act to hasten not one moment. But then at some point, the executor who had a little rachmanis says, Rabbi, can I take off the tufts of cotton for you so you don't burn so slowly? So the rabbi says, if you take off the tufts of cotton, I will grant you a portion of the world to come. Right? So look at the difference, you see. He wouldn't open his mouth to die 1 minute earlier. The flame should go in his mouth. He didn't want to do an act, but to remove an impediment for death, he was prepared to do. So that is the whole basis of Shulchan Aruch and the Code of Jewish Law. They speak about a difference between doing something active, an active suicide, active euthanasia, or something which is just a passive act, not taking certain treatments which could be great with great suffering, and to just take away the impediment which is stopping you. You're dying anyways. You're already what you call a moribund. The person is already in a state of he's already dying, in the throes of death, as you call it. So then when the person is in the throes of death, you don't need to do heroics to stop things, right? So obviously you'll have a lot of rabbis who will talk about this case and that case and this case and that. It's not so common. I'm just giving you a general outline of what the halacha is. But assisted suicide, I think, takes it a little bit too far, and that the doctors should have to, go and provide that for people. But that's become the law in Canada, by the way. I don't know if you know that. It was recently passed by the parliament. Now they're trying to pass another law, at least to protect the doctors. The doctors, if they're religious doctors, they shouldn't have to participate in this if they don't want to. This is what's going on in Canada. But I just want to say that for Noahide code, both at the beginning of life, it's quite strict in terms of abortions, and at the end of life also it's quite strict in terms of euthanasia. At the end of life, even though it says that you're not allowed to end the life, but you're still allowed to pray that the person shouldn't suffer. Other people are allowed to pray, and even though we know prayer works, so you're allowed to pray that the person shouldn't go through extended suffering, and that's not considered as if you actively participated in a death or a suicide. That's just a prayer. Prayer, ultimately, God is the one that does it, right? It's not like giving a pill for someone to die, but you're allowed to pray that a loved one shouldn't suffer. So this is a quite complex subject, but the main thrust of this halacha is that we believe that every human being has a purpose in life. And even sometimes they don't see the purpose, but there is a purpose. take away days from a person's life is murdering someone is like we are mixing into God's plan, and we think that we could end somebody's life even a day earlier, which we can't, because every person has their mission and their purpose. And so the prohibition against murder is to reinforce in the human beings the idea that life is precious, and even a compromised life is precious. And no one ever knows what a person can accomplish in their life, even in a compromised situation. Now, the Nazis, they wanted to kill the weak, the frail. The first people they killed were obviously they got eventually the homosexuals and the Jews and all of that. But the first people they would kill, they would go into the mental asylums, and they would kill those people because they thought there's no purpose in their life. We'll decide who has purpose. They were the first people that they would kill. I know the Rabbi had a brother that was one of these institutions in Petrovsk, and he was murdered by the Nazis for that reason, because murderers have that idea. They believe that that they'll decide who has a purpose and what has a purpose in life. So we believe that every life is valuable, and no one can say one life is greater than another. Every person has a purpose. Some have purposes that we can see, others have purposes that we don't see. But murder is murder is murder. And everyone has a purpose in life. And life is sacred. And we human beings have no right to tamper in that sacredness of life. And that's what I have to say for the day. So I wish you all a good Shabbos. And anybody have any questions? Oh, Susan has the article, medical assistance. If anybody wants to see it, it has all the information. It's in the comments. If you want to click that, you can see all what's going on in the Canadian law. So actually, we wish everybody. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say it's particularly egregious because apparently instead of offering social services now, some people are being offered the quote unquote maid as an alternative to, for example, being offered housing or mental health services. Like, I feel like science fiction. I can't even believe how terrible it is, but it's really happening.
It's called slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. Once you approve these things, you allow it. And then someone will say, I don't like my spouse. I think I'll just go. Whatever. Who knows where people are going to take this thing to. Anyways, but we shouldn't be tested, and a lot of people are tested at the end. And there are certain circumstances where the strict understanding with the law as it is right now is quite broad and definitely can be very much abused.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Arlene. Okay, so if I understood correctly, that everyone has a time that their so-called their time to die is pre-written in advance. And so if you're murdered, you may have died anyway for other reasons or causes. So what happens, unfortunately, to these murderers who walk into schools and kill little kids? I mean, their time is, I can't believe their time would be up.
Just to be consistent.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I guess I'm not supposed to answer you on these kind of questions because I can't hear. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So she's asking a good question. What about the Nazis? They killed 1.5 million children. I mean, the questions go on and on. It's not just in every situation. Like the monster of the Nazi is beyond the evil of the act is beyond words, beyond anything. And I'm not coming here to diminish in any way, shape, or form the evil of it. It's actually it's even more evil than anything else. But it's the Jewish belief that person's time, I mean, whether it's one child or 1,000 children or 1 million children, right? it's our belief that, in that generation, there were a lot of souls that had smaller missions. They had missions of a smaller times frame. I know it's hard to absorb this idea and to take it, and I appreciate that very much. That's why but it's our belief that on an individual level, each person, whatever they're supposed to accomplish, is accomplished in that life. Now, there is also the idea in Kabbalah of Gilgul, that sometimes a soul has to come back to the world just for a couple of days or a couple of months, a couple of years, and that is called reincarnation of the soul. The soul sometimes have to come back in this world for very little time.
Right.
Why would there be 50 kids that were shot in cold blood in a certain place, that they all coming back for it to finish up a couple, then 8 years or 10 years or 11 years? That's God's wisdom, how he figures that out exactly. He works that out. I don't know, but what we do believe is, for each individual person, whatever time a person passes away, whether it's through natural means or through murderous means, that was the day they were supposed to go. But again, the caveat is, I'm not taking away from the heinous, terrible. I'm going to say it again and again and again. The crime is the crime beyond. It's the most terrible crime that possibly can be. But
no, I understand. I'm not saying that you want it that way, but I'm just trying to figure out in my head about children.
It's a very hard thing to figure out how God orchestrates everything, because if everybody's supposed to die at a certain time, how does he make this person at this place at that time? The supercomputer of God, I can't tell you how that works exactly.
Rabbi, you helped me a little bit to process that of our very, very good friends. He was a very famous neurologist here in Toronto. And at the age around close to 70, he was struck by ALS. And he couldn't participate after 2 or 3 years, and he was a single man in life. So he asked to have doctor-assisted suicide. His doctor obviously didn't do it, but Toronto has special doctors that do just that. So at the date of when this was happening, one of our friends, he asked her to stay there. And he described to us, these 2 doctors came. It was very dignified. And they talked to him. He was very calm. And he turned and he said, "This is the best day of my life since I have ALS." And he was within 2 hours gone. A rabbi and nobody came to the funeral to say Kaddish. So did we do right because Ivan said the Kaddish in front of everybody for him? Is it all right?
Well, yeah, it's good. Ivan did a good thing. We shouldn't be tested, and people choose things based on what situation they're in, and we can never judge a person when they're in that situation. Understand what I'm saying? There's just 2 things: is right or wrong, and then there's like in Judaism, there's a lot of things you have to do, and then everybody is judged only by Hashem, right? And we don't know whatever. So a person that's ALS, I can't judge anybody with ALS, because that's beyond my to judge it. I'm just trying to give you like a outline. So today we say, even a person commits suicide, we say Kaddish for them too. Person commits suicide because we say that they were probably under duress and under mental situations and all kinds of things. So we still, the custom today, years ago, they wouldn't bury a person that committed suicide, they wouldn't bury them in a Jewish cemetery. Today, we bury everybody in the Jewish cemetery.
Right, yeah.
In other words, a lot of the halachic authorities say, like, you can't judge somebody probably while they were committing suicide, they had regrets. There's lots of things going on, and most people, the reason why they're ending their life is because either there's mental issues, issues, pain issues, they're beyond their control. But look, there's some people that choose to go fight the battle further and further and further, right? Others, decide to. But like I can't really stand in judgment of anybody that. But what I am saying is, in general, suicide is not a good thing. It's a wrong thing, and even though I will say kaddish for the person, but it's not something we can condone, so to speak. Anyhow, so I hope you understand. Are we able to hear me between the unstableness? You can call me you can call me later and talk a little bit more about it. We should speak about happier things. So next week we're going to do the sixth and the seventh law. The sixth law is the prohibition against idolatry, and the seventh law is a law against adultery and incest, which that's going to be in the last class of this group of classes. Okay, so
Thanks
stay
very
tuned.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank-
great day and a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.